So good morning, one and all present here. So before starting the session for the participants, there are some important points to note. All the materials related to FDP will be set in Google Classroom as well as through your email IDs. I have sent you a link for attendance cum feedback. So after every session, you have to submit the attendance cum feedback form on that given link. On the last date of the FDP, I will send you a link for the test and it is compulsory for all. In your account on Atal portal, you have to fill the feedback at the end of the FDP. You will receive a e-certificate in your account only if you will attend at least 80% of the session and score 60% of marks in the test and fill the feedback form. So I request you all, please keep your mic off during the sessions and send your query, if any, in the chat box during the session. And at the end of the session, you can unmute your mic and you can ask the questions. So now we are going to start our first session on bituminous pavement distresses, causes and cures by Professor Prithvi Singh Kandhal sir. Now I would like to take the privilege to introduce our expert speaker, Professor Prithvi Singh Kandhal ji. Professor Prithvi Singh Kandhal is a Associate Director Emeritus of the National Center for Asphalt Technology NCAT, based at Auburn University, Alabama, USA. NCAT is the largest asphalt bitumen road technology center in the world. Prior to joining NCAT in 1988, Professor Kandhal served as a Chief Asphalt Road Engineer of the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation for 17 years. He has served as a President of the Association of Asphalt Paving Technologies, Chairman of the American Society for Testing and Materials, ASTM International Committee on Road Paving Standards, and the chairman of the US Transportation Research Board Committee on the Asphalt Roads. Professor Kandhal has published over 120 technical papers and has co-authored the first ever textbook on asphalt road technology, which is used by more than 25 universities in the US. He has traveled to various countries across the world to providing training and consulting service in asphalt bitumen technology. Professor Kandhal has been a practicing highway engineer in India for over 25 years and in the US for the 30 years. In recent years, he has drafted many standards for the Indian Road Congress, including specifications for dense graded bituminous mixes, stone matrix asphalt, and ready-made pothole patching mix. He has also instrumental single-handedly in introducing viscosity grading of bitumen in India in lieu of penetration grading in 2005. He has now published in July 2016 the first ever textbook cum reference book, Bituminous Road Construction in India. In April 2012, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award in Asphalt Road Technology from the International Association of Asphalt Paving Technology during their annual banquet held in Austin, Texas, USA. Professor Kandhal has conducted forensic analysis of bituminous pavement in many countries across the world. So not taking much time, I would like to invite Professor Prithvi Singh Kandhal sir to please start the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Madhulisa, for the kind introduction. And now I'll try to share the screen. And you have to help me by.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, you have to enable first.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can do it full screen and slide mode. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, as you can see, the title of my talk is Bituminous Pavement Distresses, Causes and Cures. I know that civil engineering is a very vast subject, and we talk about roads, railway, bridges, buildings, sanitary, hydraulics, and environmental engineering, so many things, And since we have so many participants, some of them may not be interested in each and every topic. But my topic is such that you have to use a bituminous road when you go to your work, when you go for shopping, when you go to see your friends or whatever. I mean, there are streets and highways and roads which are using all the time. And over 95% of these roads are bituminous, the rest are cement concrete. So as a civil engineer, when you use these roads and streets, I think you encounter a lot of problems, and through my talk, you will get some insight, like what's happening. So unless we know the pavement distresses, which are very common, we have to know them before we do any forensic analysis, which is more like an advanced stage type of thing here. So I hope you will bear with me, and my talk is not highly technical, it's very simple, and I'll go through that, and at the end of my talk, I will talk about two forensic analysis. There are 8 of them in my book, but I'll talk about 2 of them here, so that you can have some interest. Now, this is a picture in the US back in early 1900. And you can see here, there's no road. So there's no road, no problem, life is very easy. But obviously, we have lots of roads and streets which have been paved over the years. So we have to take care of those problems. So bituminous pavement distresses can be minimized if the basic requirements for flexible pavement are met. And that's what I'm going to discuss in the next slide. Okay. Basic requirements for a flexible pavement, as you know, rigid pavement consists of cement concrete. Flexible is bituminous pavement. 3 things are very important for a success of a flexible pavement, and these are drainage, drainage, drainage. That means we can never overemphasize the effect of drainage on road pavements. Second, sufficient thickness and internal strength to carry expected traffic. We have to design our roads, with sufficient thickness. Excuse me, I'll just close the door. We have to design road with a sufficient thickness based upon the traffic. Higher the traffic, more the thickness. Adequately dense to prevent penetration of moisture from underneath, sides, and surface. And the top surface of the bituminous pavement should be smooth, waterproof, skid resistant, resistant to wear, distortion, and deterioration by weather. These are some of the fundamentals we have to keep in mind. Well, there is a general requirement. Let me see if I can see. Okay, I'm trying to see if I can get a pointer, or I can just use it. Okay. Okay, there are somehow the top is I cannot see that. I can read the title, but anyway, there are some causes, like if you have a poor quality of materials and construction, there will be distress, very soon in the road pavement. Like there are some contractors who don't do a good job, and that they build a road with a very poor quality. And sometimes if our designers have not done a good job of providing adequate payment thickness, we can have problems. Amount of traffic and rate of loading is very important. When I say rate of loading, very slow speed or standing traffic is the worst for bituminous pavement. That's why, near the intersections, we see a lot of rutting, because there's a rate of loading is very low, or the traffic is just kind of standing. Aging of asphalt binder, as the bitumen ages, it gets oxidized. And when it gets oxidized, it becomes brittle and can have all kinds of problems. So the bituminous pavement the surface course might have a life of 8 to 10 years. Beyond that, the binder has aged or oxidized so much, that there will be some problems. So we got to take care of that. Everything is a life to it, Then the effect of climate is important. If you have more freeze and thaw and wetting and drying, they do have a toll on the life of the pavement. This slide just shows you, in the top you see just how the traffic tire is there, and the stresses are being dispersed. As you go down, the stress is less and less. So we need a high quality bituminous concrete on the top where the stresses are very high. But the main thing is this bottom figure is important, that at the bottom of the tire where the load is being applied, I have a bituminous pavement which is acting like a beam, like asphalt concrete or bituminous concrete is more like a beam. So under the load, you can see here that in this beam, just under the load, I have compression on the top and tension at the bottom of the beam. And once this tire goes on the side here, I have a reversal. Now I have a tension on the top and compression at the bottom. So this beam of asphalt concrete is undergoing a reversal of stresses. So the more the number of repetition, the more it's going to damage the bituminous pavement. So this slide is very important, that your beam is flexing all the time. Now there are typical distresses in bituminous pavement. On the left side, you see the distress mode, and then on the right column, you see the distress manifestation. First, we have a fracture. It is fracture. That means we have cracking in there. Cracking is more like a fracture. I mean, you cannot put it together back again. It's just a fracture. And cracking can be different. 3 types of cracking, and I'll discuss all of them in detail later on. First is the load-associated cracking, which is called fatigue cracking. Second is the non-load associated. That means traffic has nothing to do with that, but still the pavement is cracking. And the third is the reflection cracking. So I'm going to talk about them in detail, show you a lot of pictures, so when you go out, you can identify the problem when you are doing a forensic analysis. And then we also have spalling, which is also part of the type of fracture. Then we have distortion. I mean, the pavement is still there, but its shape has changed. So in that, we have a permanent deformation, or called rutting. First, we can have a densification. Like if we did not compact the bituminous concrete much, then the traffic is going to densify, and that will show up with like a small rutting. And then we can have creep, which is called rutting, shoving, and corrugations. Also a lot of pictures on those. And third is distortion from swelling and frost. I mean, this will occur in the near Himalayas and all that. We don't have this kind of problem much in most of India, but it's prevalent near the Himalayas. Then we also have slippage, which is also a kind of distortion. The third distress mode we have is a disintegration. I mean, the pavement is just falling apart. It's disintegrating. And in that, we will have 4 kinds of manifestation. One is raveling, which is loss of surface, and I'll show you a picture on that. Scaling, part of the pavement is scaled off. Stripping, which is very, very important. Stripping means your bituminous film has peeled off from the aggregate, and I'll show you a lot of pictures on that. And then finally, many of them lead to potholes, which is also disinterior. So these are the things which are the pavement is kind of falling apart. Then lastly, we have some other miscellaneous type distress mode. One is the reduced skid resistance. Like I might have a very good pavement, which is very strong, there is no problem whatsoever. No, but if it lost its skid resistance, if the motor vehicles are skidding when it is wet, then it's no good because people are dying from that. So still it's a kind of distress. We had to take care of that. And lastly, also we were riding quality roughness. Again, I might have a very good pavement with the sufficient bitumen content, everything is fine. But if when it was paved, the riding quality wasn't provided at the beginning, so it has become rough. So that's also a kind of distress. Actually, we have to take care of that. So now we will talk about each distress I described in that table. And let me talk about cracking of bituminous pavement. That's like a fracture. The distress is fracture. Now, first we'll talk about load-associated cracking, which is also called fatigue cracking. And then thereafter I'll talk about non-load associated. So let's talk about load-associated cracking. It's also called alligator or map cracking. The kind of cracking you see is similar to you see on the alligator skin. Also a picture of those or map cracking. Now that will happen, fatigue cracking will happen when the loads are too heavy for the pavement structure. That means, we designed a structure, let's say, I'm talking about the bituminous pavement. We designed a structure for 120 millimeter, but the traffic is too much. We have heavily loaded traffic, and the axle loads, the reputational axle load is very high, so that thickness may be inadequate. So that will cause alligator or map cracking or fatigue cracking. And again, the same thing here, too many repetition of load, more than the design, inadequate support, pavement layer subgrade. If subgrade is very weak underneath, I might have provided a very good bituminous layer, but the pavement will start to develop fatigue cracking. Poor drainage, that will also cause the subgrade to lose its strength and all that. Very stiff binder in the surface course. Like in the wearing course, well, those of you don't know that the pavement consists of, the bituminous pavement consists of 3 layers. On the top, we have a wearing course, also called surface course. Then we have a binder course, and then we have a base course. Binder course is just kind of binding the base course and the wearing course. So there are 3 layers actually in our pavement systems. So if I use a very stiff binder in the surface course, and the binder course has a soft binder, then we will have cracking problem, which is quite obvious, that you cannot put a very hard surface on the soft surface. Now, most of the fatigue cracking will occur in the wheel path where the traffic is going, because that's where the load is applied. I mean, there's a dispersal of loads, but on the wheel path, there's more repetition of load. So that's where the fatigue cracking will appear first. And then when this kind of fatigue cracking occurs too much, then potholes can develop in the advanced stage. And I'll show you the pictures of all these things over here. Now here is a picture of a interstate highway in the US. You can say it's like a national highway. Okay, here you can see here the fatigue cracking. And you can see it's occurring in the wheel path. That's where the traffic is going. And it has caused a lot of secondary cracking also. So this is a fatigue cracking occurring because of all the reasons which I mentioned before. And here is another example of fatigue cracking. And you can see here then, if we don't seal them properly, then we don't provide more thickness or overlay, then secondary cracks will start to develop alongside, which are parallel. And then if I just leave it that way for more years, then this is how the high severity fatigue cracking will occur. We'll see here. And then obviously this will cause some sort of pothole will develop at that place. Now you can see here on this highway, two-lane highway, a lot of fatigue cracking has occurred. So it needs, some kind of a recycling, maybe cold recycling, or putting some overlay on top of that to increase the thickness, those kind of things. So that's the extreme case of fatigue cracking. And here is a close-up of the fatigue cracking. And as I mentioned, we also call it chicken wire or alligator pattern type cracking, which is typical in fatigue cracking. Here is another example of, again, the alligator type cracking. So once it's in advanced stage, that's how it will look like. Okay, so that was the load associated cracking. And now I'll talk about non-load associated. It's also called thermal cracking because of the temperature. Transverse cracks will occur at regular interval because asphalt binder is too stiff at low service temperature. Now this kind of thermal cracking will occur in like Ladakh, Leh areas in India. We are not concerned about this thing in most of India. Only in Ladakh, Leh area, we have to take care of this. I had the privilege of conducting a workshop for Border Roads organization in Leh area. And my thrust in the talk was how do we build roads in a high altitude, low temperature conditions. So this was one part of the problem we have as a thermal cracking, because if the binder is too stiff at low service temperature, then it will happen. It will also happen to rapid chilling of the road surface. If a cold front comes from the north, which happens in the northern tier states of the United States, there is no Himalaya between the Canada and the USA. So the chilling winds, cold winds come all of a sudden from Canada to United States and call this kind of problem. And these kind of cracks can happen overnight. If there's sudden fall in temperature, like within 1 hour, let's say your temperature goes from minus 10 degrees Celsius to minus 20 degrees Celsius within 1 hour. So it will cause a contraction, and the bitumen binder cannot react to that. It just fractures, so it can happen overnight. But luckily we have Himalayas, between China, and not China, I should say Tibet. Tibet should be an independent country, actually. We have Himalayas between Tibet and India. So we don't have any kind of rapid chilling, because Himalaya provides a good barrier to us, But still we would have some kind of thermal cracking in the Ladakh area. Also, if we use a highly temperature susceptible binder, this will happen. I don't have time to go through all this, and there's a lecture only on the binder, a 1 hour lecture. You can, if you want to learn more about asphalt technology, there are 12 lectures I uploaded on the YouTube on right from the binder, aggregate, mixed design, and everything. You just dial in Kandhan lectures on YouTube, and you will see 12 lectures, 1 hour lectures on that. So just for the people who are interested in this topic. Subgrade type, thermal cracking will be more frequent on the sandy subgrade than clay. And the age of the pavement, as the asphalt ages, it oxidizes, it becomes stiff. So it cannot give in when the pavement is cool. So this is something of mostly for the BRO, Border Road Organization in the Ladakh area. And here I'm showing a picture of the known load associated cracking in the state of Pennsylvania, which is the north of USA, where I served as a chief asphalt road engineer for 17 years. And you can see here that all these are transverse cracking. And they happen like overnight, and there's no cracking, and during the nighttime, the pavement was chilled at a very, very rapid rate. And this will happen overnight. First, obviously, the thickness of the width of the crack will be very small, but with the time, they will become prominent and wider, as you can see here. So they appear like something which happens on the concrete road, but here is a bituminous road. So we have to use a proper binder, softer binder, which will be softer when the temperature is lower. I'm just showing this picture, just to, we don't have any interaction, when I show this picture, usually I ask the audience what's happening here. Here is a road with the white striping here, paint. Here's a black road, black bitumen. On that side is also black, and here's a white paint stripe. How come we have thermal cracking, very fine cracking on both edges of the white stripe? I asked the audience, let them think about that. But the answer is that the coefficient of expansion and contraction, this is heated more, being black surface, and this will be heated less because of white surface. So the coefficient of expansion and contraction is different between the white area and the black area. So because of that differential, we see this kind of a very fine cracking. It doesn't happen all the time. You don't see it. I happen to just take a picture of this thing in one place, just to show the point, that it can happen because of the temperature change. Okay, now we will talk about the longitudinal cracking. It occurs parallel to the center line of the roadway. That's why we call it longitudinal cracking. Just like we had the known load associated cracking was in the transverse direction. These are the longitudinal cracking. Now, there are two types I'm going to discuss here. One, the center line joint opening, which is called longitudinal joint. That's the joint between adjacent lanes. When I'm paving one lane and then the other lane, there is a joint is created. And also a picture of that, next slide, because let me show the picture first, I can understand better. So let's say here I have this lane and this lane. Say the paver went on this lane first. So I did not have any confinement on this side. So I got a very low density at the edge of this pavement. And then when the paver came around and paved this lane, there was a confinement here. So I got a good density on this side. So there's a density gradient here. I got a low density on this side of the joint, construction joint, and I got high density on this side. And because of that, this joint opens up. There are many different ways this longitudinal joint can be made in such a way that there is no crack happens. And I had the privilege of investigating 8 different types of construction joint in the US. And I published 5 or 6 papers on those, which give you different techniques, how you can minimize or eliminate this cracking. So this is the joint between the adjacent lanes because of the density gradient across the joint, low density and high density. So this will occur. Sometimes you will see that, you will see more on the airport runways because there are so many. Pardon? Can you hear me? Mazula sir, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can.
Okay. There was some voice, that's why I thought.
Yes, some participants unmuted.
Okay. So this is a construction joint, which we have to take care by properly constructing it. Then there's also a edge cracking, which I'll show you a picture of that. when we widen a road, so it will happen. Also, it can happen because of lack of lateral support. And then lastly, it can happen because of poor drainage. I don't have good ditches to take care of the surface drainage on the side. This pavement was up to here, and then I widen it maybe. When I widen it, I widen with different types of materials, obviously. After I do it like 8-10 years, I may not have the same kind of material and same thing, but still this will happen because I widen it by this one. So this crack will always happen. It's called edge cracking, and we have to seal it off, all the time. Then we talk about the block cracking. In the block cracking, we have both transverse and longitudinal cracking. And I'll show you a picture of that. Most often, it's on the low volume roads or parking lots where there's hardly any traffic. Because thixotropic hardening or structuring of the asphalt binder takes place due to lack of traffic and heat. Let's say if I build 1 kilometer of road and I don't put any traffic on that for 2-3 years, and then I put another kilometer of road and I open to traffic, you will see in after 2-3 years, the 1 kilometer of road which didn't have any traffic will develop this kind of cracking, because the asphalt bitumen binder develops a structuring, or it becomes like a hardening. It acts like a cement concrete. And as you know, if I put a cement concrete and don't provide any joints, it will crack. So that's what happens here. So asphalt does need some traffic and heat. If you can heat up that bitumen, that layer, it will be restored back to this to its softness. But we cannot do that. So this is what happened here. Here is the driveway in the US. And you can see this block cracking because the driveway has hardly any traffic. Just the car comes and goes, few times in a day. There's no traffic here. So the bitumen binder has developed a structure like a cement concrete, and this kind of thing, block cracking will occur. Here is a close-up of the block cracking. You can see the cracking is on the both sides, transverse and the longitudinal. And okay, then we also have the reflection cracking. Reflection cracking, these are because of the discontinuities in the underlying layer, propagate through the asphalt surface due to movement of the cracks. Now, discontinuities could be cracks or joint in the underlying concrete pavement. This, let's say I have a cement concrete pavement and it has joints in it, and some cracks in it, and then I put an asphalt or bituminous overlay on top of that. There will be reflection cracking will occur in the bituminous pavement on the top. Also, if I have cracks in the soil cement base course. Now, lately in India, we have started to provide cement treated base called CTB. Some of you might have heard. And in the US, the experience is that if I provide a CTB, cement treated base, then as a base course, and then I provide bituminous binder course, bituminous surface course, the cement treated or soil cement will develop crack after a few years. It could be like 8 years or 10 years, I don't know. But in the US, it has happened. And then it becomes a permanent nuisance. Whenever you put asphalt, bituminous overlay is reflects through. So as I understand right now, in some of our the so-called perpetual payment in India, the government is using the CTB, which I don't think it's a good idea. I won't use that in a perpetual payment. Now, so anyway, I thought I mentioned here. And then if I have a existing bituminous pavement is highly cracked, and then I put an overlay on top of that, that can also cause reflection cracking on the top. Again, the causes are thermal because the movements of the joints underneath are contraction, expansion, or because of that, the top layer starts to develop cracks. There's a more load you have, the faster the reflection crack will develop. Now here you can see here there's a crack here in the two layer. And I don't know whether it's a reflection crack because of cement concrete underneath, or it could be a thermal crack. I show you a picture of the thermal crack, which was also transferred. So if you are going for a forensic analysis, somebody asks you, okay, what is it? Is it a thermal crack or is it a reflection crack? Well, I don't want to speculate on all these. In the forensic science, you should not speculate. That's what we do mostly in India, that somebody goes out and say, oh, this is what it is, and then you take care of that. I believe in verifying it. I believe why it happened before I treat it. So what I will do, I'll take a core right on the crack itself. And here I took a core, and there was a cement concrete underneath, I know. But the crack you can see in the bituminous concrete here, but there is no joint here. If it was a reflection crack, I will see a joint or crack in the cement concrete. I don't see it here. So it's not a reflection crack, it's a thermal crack. So that's how we find it in here. The answer to how do we treat, supposing we have a cement concrete pavement, and we want to put a asphalt or bituminous overlay on top of that, I know that reflection cracking will occur. So one method which has been highly successful in the US is that when I put a bituminous wearing course on top of cement concrete, right over where the joint was in the concrete, I saw a joint and seal it with a joint sealant. So I am already creating a weak line in there. So when the reflection cracking won't take place, if it takes place, it will take place there or where the joint is already sealed. So that's one way we can take care of this. So how do we take care of the cracks? I said cures and all that. So cracks should be sealed as soon as possible. So there is no water penetration in the pavement, which may cause further damage. As I said, water drainage is very important. So we must seal the cracks as soon as possible. If it's very, very narrow, obviously 2 or 3 millimeters, we cannot seal it. But when it becomes somewhat wider, then we can seal it. Asphalt rubber is considered the best material for sealing cracks. Unfortunately, we don't have that in India. And mostly people put asphalt binder like VG10, VG30, or they put emulsion. And that doesn't work out. It's always kind of when the joint narrows due to expansion, the sealant comes on the surface and tracked by the traffic. And in emulsion, we have 35% water, so that evaporates. So what we need in India is asphalt rubber as a crack sealer. So if I have a crack here, you can see it here. If I don't take care of the sealing, when it develops, then it will develop secondary cracks because I did not seal the primary crack. And once that happens, then I can have spalling because the two cracks, the material is spalled. So we must seal the crack as soon as possible. As they say, a stitch in time saves 9. That's what happens here. So now we will talk about rutting. Rutting can occur because of lack of inadequate subgrade support. I know those who know about pavement materials, we have the subgrade at the bottom, is the natural soil. And if that is not very strong, it won't provide good support. And so the whole pavement, bituminous pavement, which I put down, will kind of settle down and cause rutting. Rutting means ruts on the surface. So that because of the subgrade support, and I'll show you how do we identify what's happening, at least roughly. it can happen, rutting can happen because of unstable asphalt course. The bituminous concrete or asphalt concrete course, if it is unstable, that means I didn't do a good mix design. So the mix is very unstable. Or I use rounded aggregate. I need to use angular aggregate in my bituminous layer, so it has good strength, Or I put too much asphalt binder, too much bitumen binder. So all these can cause a unstable asphalt course. The underlying layers might be okay, everything's okay, but the bituminous layer are not strong enough. And then the third cause can be stripping in asphalt courses. If there's a stripping, like a peeling away of the bitumen binder from the aggregate, then that's called stripping, and then the mix will lose its strength. And also a picture of that. We'll discuss stripping in more detail later on in the talk. Now, before I talk about rutting, let me talk about bleeding. And sometimes rutting follows after bleeding, but not necessarily. Now you can see here there's a bleeding in the wheel track area. When I put down this road, maybe I put too much binder, bitumen binder in the mix. My mix design was bad, so all the binder kind of came up on the surface and caused bleeding. Bleeding is not bleeding. We have to take care of the bleeding, because if it is wet, then the pavement, the vehicles can start to skid on top of that. Now here's another example of bleeding. You can see here again, it's in the wheel track area. So bleeding, sometimes it can lead to rutting, and sometimes it may not lead to rutting, but still it's not a desirable surface phenomenon. How do we treat the bleeding? And let's say it happened, I put too much binder there or whatever. So what I can do is apply hard sand and roll it during hot weather to blot out the extra asphalt binder, bitumen binder at the surface. I mean, you can do it one time, that doesn't happen, do it second time. And then after you do that, you just pray to the God. It might work. It may or may not work, if it doesn't work, then you have to do something else, like place a surface dressing, what you call chip seal, on the bleeding asphalt surface, or you can put a slurry seal or micro surfacing, on the bleeding asphalt surface. You can do that, but it is not desirable. We got to take care of that. Now here we are talking about rutting. We said rutting can happen due to a subgrade which is not strong. Rutting can also happen because of the bituminous layer. They don't have enough strength or whatever. Now in this case, when I take a look at that, although I have to verify it, again, if I go on this job and I see this kind of a rutting, I would say that it's happening because of a subgrade which is very weak. Because the way the rutting is taking place here is kind of very abrupt, rutting here. There is no bitumen flow. It's not very smooth. And sometimes there might be some crack in here also. But this I would say, because of the subgrade, and especially you can see there's a bridge here. When we do the approaches of the bridge, after all the work is done, the approaches are done in the last. And there you will see that sometimes we don't do a good compaction job of compacting the subgrade and all that. So this kind of rutting will occur near the approach to a bridge, on both sides. So, but again, you can identify the problem by doing some more exploration. But I'm just showing you a picture which can sometimes, give some hint why the rutting is taking place. Now, this is a picture on a national highway in the US, and you can see a lot of rutting in here. But since the rutting here is very very smooth, you can see there's a flow of between mix on the side, hump is there, but very smooth. So I would suspect that this rutting is being caused in the bituminous layer and not due to subgrade. Now here is some forensic, analysis which I did in Pennsylvania between Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. There's a Pennsylvania Turnpike, which has a lot of traffic on it, and it was made of cement concrete, and they laid bituminous course for the first time on cement concrete. First, they put a leveling course, which was 25 millimeter leveling course. Then they put a binder course, which was 50 millimeters thick, and then they put a wearing course, which was 37 millimeter thick. For the first time, they put these 3 layers on the cement concrete pavement. It's a 4-lane highway with lots of traffic, lots of truck traffic. So these are the 2 lanes which are open to the traffic. The other 2 lanes are on the other side of the ridge, and they were under construction. So only 2 lanes were open for the traffic, which was previously plying on 4 lanes. So as soon as they opened this to the traffic, there was about 25 millimeter rut in the wheel track. And so they asked me, I being the chief asphalt road engineer in the state, and they called me out, and I went there, and they said, we got 37.5 millimeter wearing course, surface course. Below that, we have 50 millimeters of binder course. So which one we should remove? Rutting is happening. Rutting can occur only in the surface course. Rutting can occur only in the binder course, and rutting can occur in both the courses. So they told me that should I remove just the surface course by milling, or should I remove both of them? I said I'm not a god, I cannot see which layer is causing the rutting problem. So they were not happy with that. I said, no, until I find out for sure that which layer is causing a problem. Otherwise, I'll give you wrong advice, and it might be overkill or less. So I told them that you have to give me a sample of the slab, cut out a slab across the road, and about 150 millimeters wide, apply two cuts of saw cut, and then cut them in different pieces so I can assemble them in the laboratory and see which layer is causing the problem. And then I can give you proper advice. I mean, they were not happy with that because so much traffic was plying on these 2 lanes. So for 3-4 hours, they had to divert the traffic on the back roads when they were trying to dig this trench and give me the sample. But sometimes, you have to do that in a forensic analysis. You don't want to speculate. That's a gamble. If I tell them that, okay, just mill off the surface course, which is 37 millimeter, and leave the binder course in place. And if they do that, it will be less expensive. But the binder course is causing a problem, then the problem will come back again. If I tell them to remove both the courses, then also I might be wrong. So you will see here in the forensic analysis here, which I did, they took out the slabs here. I assembled the slabs here. Here is the rut in the wheel track. The rutting is taking place, and I used the white out to demarcate the surface course and the binder course, and here is the leveling course. So I was mostly interested in these 2 layers to see, whether rutting is taking place in the surface course or in the binder course or both. So you can see here, also a close-up of this rut here. Is the rut, there's a hump here. And you can see here in the close-up, here's the rut here. And you can see here the surface course is uniform in depth. No rutting is taking place in the surface course. The rutting is taking place in the binder course. You can see the binder as thickness is lower here, it is hubbed over here. So this rutting is taking place in the binder course. So in this case, I have to remove both of them. Although the wearing course is surface course is okay, but the binder course is causing a problem. So I have to remove that. When I remove that, this is also removed. So if I were given advice to them just to remove only the wearing course, surface course, that would have been a wrong advice. This is what you got to do sometimes. You have to do some extra work, legwork to find out. Now, the second question is then, okay, I told them it's in the binder course is the problem. So why it is occurring in the binder course, not in the wearing course? What's the problem? And you can see that in the next slide, please. Strength, So by mistake, they used a wrong stockpile of aggregate from Ohio. Ohio was a nearby state, and the contractor, by mistake, used a wrong stockpile, which consisted of rounded aggregate, and he ended up using that in the binder course. So you can see here that was the cause. This is the kind of forensic, you have to do, and for that you have to make some extra effort. You don't want to speculate, just you got to see it for yourself. Okay, here you can see again, just like a rough thing, here, that the kind of rutting you see here can tell you something about what's happening. Not always, you got to verify it. Like on the top, there's a plastic movement depressed in the wheel path with humps in either side. Now that would tell me that the rutting is taking place within the bituminous layer, whether it's the bituminous surface course or bituminous binder course or base course. Now below that, I have this kind of rutting, and that kind of tells me that's happening because of the consolidation or densification of the bituminous layer in the wheel path. It's just densification. There's no movement, or you don't see any humps in it. And at the bottom, you will see that the mechanical deformations because of the subsistence of in the unbound base course or subgrade, and that part is causing the problem. So that's why there's a settlement here of bituminous layer. You can see it because the subgrade is giving way. That's the kind of example I gave you before near the bridge, bridge approach. So that's what's happening there. So these kind of things, can give you some idea, not 100% correct, but some idea about what's happening. But you don't want to speculate on that. You got to verify that by digging up trench, making samples on that. So how do we do the treatment for rutting? Rutting is taking place. What do we do? Just don't go out, and take a look at rutting and say, okay, do this or do that. That involves a lot of expenditure. You have to go to confirm. You got to diagnose the problem. That's the forensic analysis. You got to diagnose. Only after you diagnose the problem, you can treat the problem. Otherwise, you are just doing something which may or may not work. So first, determine the cause and location of rutting. What is called the rutting? I got to find that out. Only then I can treat it. Any layer exhibiting rutting must be removed or milled off. We have milling machine these days in India also, no problem. Completely and replaced with more stable mixed course. So if rutting is being caused by bituminous layer, you just remove it, and design a better mix. Okay, so we have handled the rutting, cracking, rutting, and all those in detail. Now we'll talk about slippage cracking. It's associated with slippage mechanism because there was a poor bond between the surface layer and the underlying layer. We normally apply tack coat. When I put a surface course, bituminous surface course on the top of bituminous binder course, I apply tack coat, so there's a good bond between these two. But if I apply too much tack coat, it's called like a lubrication. If I apply too little tack coat, it may not give me the bond. So in that case, slippage cracking can take place. Mostly it will occur on steep grade or intersections. It won't occur on level, sometimes it might due to other reasons, but mostly it occur in steep grade or intersections because of the acceleration and braking exert surface traction force. And they cause, the relative movement of the surface force against the binder course underneath. And they are U-shaped. When you look at these slippage cracking, they appear to you like a U-shaped. It is a slippage cracking. So in that area which you have a slippage cracking, you just dig it out, do some patch repair. And that takes care of the slippage crack in that area because they are not continuous there. So here is an example of a slippage crack. It's here you don't see the whole road, but the road is going kind of going up or down here. Here the U-shaped here, and the traffic is going in this direction here. In the US, the traffic is on the right side. So if there is U-shaped here, and traffic is going this way. Another example of a slippage crack. And again, to correct it, you just dig it out, in this area, do a patch repair, and that takes care of that. Another example of a slippage crack. I don't know, I've not seen too much of those here in India, actually. Now here there's some cracking called hairline checking. I'm just throwing in these things, because you might encounter these. This will happen when I'm compacting the bituminous concrete. If the bituminous concrete is hot, is too soft, then under the roller, I might get this kind of checking. So I got to do something at that point in time during construction that I don't end up with this hairline checking or cracking, because later on they can develop and widen and give me some problem. So it has to be taken care of by either I delay the compaction or do other things with the mixed design or whatever. That's another subject. I might have corrugations. And so that will also happen to a lack of bond between asphalt courses because of the unstable surface course mix. It will corrugate, only you will feel the corrugate when you are driving with the car will just go like thudding. It will happen because of braking and accelerating action near the intersections where you're applying brakes, because the traffic light goes from green to red, you're applying the brakes. Areas with corrugations have to be milled off and replaced with a highly stable asphalt mix. That is cure for that. And now here, it's not a good slide here. There are corrugations here on this road here, but you don't see them in this slide actually. But there are corrugations here. Again, this is somewhat better slide. You can see the corrugations here. It's on the steep slope here. These are the corrugations taking place here. And as you go in the level area, then they are not there. They are mostly on the slope and mostly near the intersections. Now we come to raveling, which is like a disintegration of the bituminous pavement. That's what we will cover now, raveling, stripping and all that. Raveling is a progressive disintegration of asphalt surface as a result of dislodgement of aggregate particles in the mix. Now that's on the surface, you see that is the asphalt surface. Progressive disintegration of asphalt surface, you see on the surface. This will happen because of lack of sufficient cohesion due to low in-place density. Now, I've seen raveling in the US, I've seen raveling in India. If I build a bituminous road and within 1 year, I start to see raveling, which is loss of the surface now. First, I see the fines are coming out and then bigger particles are coming out. Within 1 year, it happens, you can bet that 90% of the time it is because of the low in-place density. I did not compact the mix, good at the time of construction. So you take a core and you check the density, you'll find out 90% of the time, you will find the lower density, which caused the leveling problem. So that you can, but then you verify it again. I'm just telling you some broad conclusions, but you have to verify it. Third, leveling is the lack of fines in the asphalt mix matrix, especially in coarse segregated areas. And leveling will also have occur because of aging of asphalt binder. If the road is like 8 or 10 year old, surface course is 8 to 10 year old. Now the bitumen is oxidized. It doesn't have that cohesion. So it will start to lose the fines. Now, which has happened, after the road has been down for 8 or 10 years, the surface course, you have to either put an overlay on top of that or do some recycling or whatever. So everything has a lifespan. So the surface course has a lifespan of 8 to 10 years in case of dense bituminous mix. So you'll start to see some leveling there. Now I'll show you some pictures of the leveling. Now here you can show there's some leveling here. You see the rough spots here. I've lost some part of the wearing course here. I've lost it here. That's where the traffic is flying. I've not lost too much between the wheel tracks. Now here you can see here that I've lost the fine particles. The mix, the bitumen mix has sand in it, and it has coarse aggregate coarse particles. So here it looks like I lost most of the sand part, and so which is causing a leveling problem. Now here is a case of a high severity leveling. Now in this case, I not only have lost this sand, I've lost some bigger particles as well. You can see these pockets here. So I should have taken care of the leveling when it was slight, but I didn't do anything much to that. Now it has become so bad. It has become severe here. So how do I treat the leveling? I got that. Now the following treatments are suggested in the order of severity of leveling from slight to severe. If I just have a slight leveling, I can apply a fog seal with the diluted emulsified asphalt binder. That's the asphalt with the water and asphalt. So I apply just a fog seal, and we'll take care of that for 2-3 years. It will provide some binding agent on the surface, so I won't have too much of loss of the fines, at least for like 2-3 years. Not more than that. If it's too bad, then I apply a slurry seal or micro surfacing, which is available in India as well. Or I can put an overlay with a dense grade asphalt mixing. I can do that too, depending on how much money I have, and depending upon the payment, whether it's designed for that traffic at that point in time or not. Now here there's a scaling of wearing course from the binder course. Here, what we have done is that in India, there are two mixes which are really bad. We are still using it. On the top, we use a mix called SDBC, which is semi-dense bituminous concrete. 25 millimeters of that, we use that, and that is semi-dense, so it can still absorb water. And water is enemy number 1 of bitumen. And below that, we use a BM, bituminous macadam, which is very, very open. That can also take up the water. I've been comparing that for the last 15 years to remove these two items from our specification, but the Ministry of Road Transport doesn't listen. So this is a picture from Kerala. It's happening in every state, that the SDBC, which is semi-dense, is kind of scales off, is removed. And also here, the scaling is taking place. And we know that nobody in the world would use a semi-dense. When we have a dense mix is available, why you use a semi-dense or open mix? Now we come to the problem of stripping, which is very important. And we must understand that, and I'll show you some case histories of stripping problem. Stripping is a breaking of adhesive bond between the aggregate surface and asphalt binder usually in presence of water or moisture. And it's usually, but most of the time it is because of that. Because the aggregate, most of the aggregate except the limestone, they love water. They hate bitumen. So if the water is there, water will replace the bitumen. If I got like a sandstone aggregate or granite aggregate, it's coated with bitumen, and then water comes in there, the aggregate loves water. So it will take on the water. It will remove the bitumen binder. It will peel it off. So the water will get in between the bitumen layer and the aggregate, because the aggregate loves water in that case. So that's what is happening. If I have an inadequate pavement drainage system, then again, stripping will take place. So pavement drainage is very important. And as I mentioned this morning, that I, along with Dr. Sivakumar Babu and others, we wrote a textbook on pavement drainage, which was published in the United States about 2-3 years ago. And therein, I've given some case histories or some forensic analysis, which I did in the US in that book. But again, it's due to inadequate pavement drainage system. Both, when I say drainage system, both the surface drainage as well as the subsurface drainage, both are involved. Mixed with excessive air voids, poor compaction, obviously they will allow water to penetrate in there and cause problems. Mixed with lower bitumen content will be worsening the problem. Then if you have an incompatible aggregate surface and asphalt binder is displaced by water. That I already explained, that the chemistry, the surface chemistry of the aggregate is such that it loves water, then water will replace the bitumen binder. Excessive pore pressure induced by traffic. If the stripping is taking place and then the traffic is very heavy, it will accelerate the process of stripping. Lastly, which is very rare, that sometimes when the water is there, it can emulsify the asphalt binder, and then the emulsion can be washed away with the water. So let me go further and show you this picture, this case history of a national highway in the United States, where I did the forensic analysis. After this was put down, after 2-3 years, they had this kind of problem. And you can see here, it's very, very bad that you spend so much of money in putting down like 2 layers of bitumen courses, and everything was very good. And within 2 years, you see this kind of potholes developing, a lot of patching. You can see here, you do the patching here, then a new place, a lot of potholes takes place, bleeding and all that, Sometimes rutting is taking place. So you are very disheartened. And then you have to call upon somebody to do the forensic analysis to see what's happening, why it's happening within 2 years. So this was the case which I analyzed, and I put that in that pavement in Dennis' book as well. So you can see here, there's a lot of problem here. A lot of problem here, a lot of potholes occurring. There's a patching is done here and there. And every time just keep on patching, what can you do? Problem. So you got to find out, what went wrong. So here was a typical, which is very hard to, I put that in the textbook, and here I also published an international paper on this forensic analysis. And it's very rare to find, there are classic signs of stripping, which you hardly see everywhere. It's very, I was lucky to see that on this road, and I took this photograph. First, what we see is that in the beginning, you see white stain on the road. And then you see bleeding on the road. And then you see the pothole. There are three signs, classical signs of stripping, which you don't see on all the roads, but I was lucky to find this place here. So what is happening is that once in the bituminous concrete lower layer happens, start from the bottom up. what happens in the binder course, the bitumen binder is peeled off because of the water action. Now, once it's peeled off, then it exposes the aggregate, and aggregate has some fines on it. So the fines are brought to the surface by the moisture or moisture vapor, which bring it to the surface. So that's why we see the white stain first. That's why now you have to ask people who have been seeing this road for the last 2 years or whatever. You have to talk with them, to find out what did you see first, what did you see next. You have to get some sort of history from them. So that's what they said. The white stain appeared first, and then there was some bleeding. Now, once the bitumen surface, the aggregate surface lost the bitumen was loose. So then the bitumen was brought up to the surface by moisture vapor. Now, moisture vapor occupies more than 100 times the volume than moisture itself. So it brings a lot of thrust. So it brings the bitumen on the surface. So that happens second stage. And once the bitumen is on the surface, then the thing is kind of accelerated because now the moisture vapor is trapped. It cannot even go out. And that's when the part hole will develop. So I was very lucky to see all these three stages of stripping. And what you see when you dig it up, what you see in the binder course, the surface course and the binder course underneath. It starts to initiate in the binder course, and then it attacks the wearing course. So here the binder course, you can see here, there is a 50% loss of binder on the aggregate. The aggregate is just loose. You can just break this layer by hand. So it looks so pathetic that this was happen. Again, it's another example of stripping here. It's like a blackish surface, but you can still see uncoated aggregate particles. This is called stripping. Bitumen film was peeled away. It looks, so dramatic, that you cannot believe that you put down this hot mix like 2 years ago, and this is what is happening. And then the part hole will take place all over. So that was about stripping. And I'll show you one case of this kind of case in the case history later on. Now you talk about the skid resistance. My payment might be very, very good. Everything's good, but the vehicles are kind of sliding off when it is wet and causing accidents. So skid resistance is a friction between the tire and the road surface. It's quantified by friction number. And it's critical when the surface is wet and it makes it very, very slippery. Causes for low friction number, if there is a flushing or bleeding of the asphalt surface, which I showed to you before, that will cause a low skid resistance. If I have an inadequate micro texture, the pavement has two types of texture on the surface. There's a micro texture and there's a macro texture. Micro texture is coming from the aggregate. Once the aggregate is exposed due to traffic within a few months, then it exposes the aggregate surface. And if I have an inadequate micro texture of the aggregate, it will cause me lower friction number. So it will happen more in the case of aggregates that are prone to polishing because of the traffic. Like limestones are usually, not all of them, limestones are very bad candidates for, they always kind of polish very, very fast. Sandstone doesn't do that. Then if I have inadequate macro texture, which is a mixed property, how rough my mixture is, then that will also cause lower skid resistance. If I have a very smooth mix, then there are no drainage channels. So when it's raining, water cannot be squeezed out, between the tire and the road. So it will cause hydroplaning. I have a thin film of water, and then I lose control of my vehicle. It's called hydroplaning. It's important at high speed. Skid resistance always goes down as you increase the speed, so that's what happens. So skid resistance is important. It's in this case happened due to polishing of the aggregate. It's very difficult to take a picture of a surface with the polished aggregate because it doesn't show up. Only you have to see it. to see whether it's polished or not. So what we do with the polished aggregate? We got polished aggregate, low skill. So if we have to do any treatment, should always use a polish resistant aggregate. There is a surface friction requirement in our Indian specification, so it must meet that. And we can apply either slurry seal or micro surfacing on that surface which is causing problem, or apply surface dressing, or we can also overlay with new asphalt mix. So this kind of concludes this talk on the some distresses which take place on the pavement, and we are aiming for this kind of a road, which doesn't have these kind of defects. The road looks pretty good. So with that, I added. Madhulesha told me to add some case histories, which I have added 2 of them, and to give some idea about the forensic case history of forensic investigation of bituminous pavement across the world. As I said before, I published the first ever textbook on bituminous road construction in India in 2016, 5 years ago. You can buy from the Prentice Hall of India, or you can buy from Amazon. But the main thing I'm showing this picture to you is that the last chapter in this book has 8 forensic studies conducted by me across the world, which is, I think, a unique feature in the textbook. And that's what I was urging this morning, that whenever we do any forensic analysis, whether it's on a landslide or whatever, we should document everything in detail, that what's happening, and then publish it so other people can follow that, and minimize that kind of problem in the future. So now, this is what we have to do. I'm just giving you some fundamentals which I use. Not all of them are used all the time. First, you go and inspect the site and select sampling location, because you got to, only by looking at the surface, you cannot say for sure what's happening and what should be done. So you inspect site and select sampling location. Then you discuss with the project personnel that about what kind of materials were used, what kind of construction procedures were used, because you got to know all those things. Those people who are there, they know more than us, what really happened. Sometimes they might give you some hints also what happened. And an example, I'm saying that what you must know, but in 2004, a section of the Kabul-Kandahar road developed some problem. That section was built by a contractor located in Turkey, the Turkish contractor. And as you can see, because of the Taliban problem at that time, I could not visit the site. The place is still dangerous these days, even again. But so I had to go to Turkey and talk in detail with the people who were involved in the mixed design and construction and all that. So I went there to talk with them in detail. It's very important. And then I came back to Jaipur, where I was located at that time. And I was guiding the sampling locations and everything from there, and testing and analysis of test results. And these are the kind of things we have to do in a forensic analysis. Now, what I do, which is not in all cases, supposing there's a national highway in India, and it has developed some cracking problem, or it has developed some rutting problem. It's a 4-lane highway. So what I do is that to identify the problem, especially whether the problem is coming from the bituminous courses, or from subgrade, or from GSB, which is granular subbase, or wet mixed macadam, WM, and all that. If I suspect that many layers might be involved in that, or even if the top layers I know in that, still I do this kind of thing, that I select a 500-meter section, which kind of I walk on the road, which kind of represents the typical distress I'm seeing. So that 500-meter section should be selected to, which is showing a typical distress. And then I take 5 cores every 100 meters. You can see here core number 1, and do the analysis. I also, on that project, if you walk on the project, you will see that you might find a 500-meter section on the same road, which might be relatively better than the poor section. So I call it a good section, no problem. If I don't find a good section, no problem. I might find a section which is like a fair. So I do that, and I do the same thing in there too. So I can compare the results, So I got 5 cores here, which I'm analyzing for all properties in the good section, and 5 sections, cores, in the poor section. And when I find the mean and standard deviation between these two good and poor sections, sometimes I can locate what's happening, what's causing the poor section, what the problem is there. By looking at the results, you can see that. So that I will do that, I've done that in USA as well, also recently in India. So I have these 5 cores, 5 core locations here. Normally, what I do is that if this is a 4-lane highway, there's a median here. I take cores in the wheel track near the median. I take all the cores in equal distance, and in the inside lane, because I know most of the trucks in India ply in the inside lane, which is against the rules, against the traffic rules. We don't have any traffic lane sense in India. So most of them apply here. That's where the problem is causing. So I take these cores here in the inside lane, an equal distance from the median in the wheel track. I also take a 18-inch by 18-inch pit here, so I can get some more sample of the bituminous varying cores, and because I will do a lot of testing in there. Cores I am doing 150 millimeter diameter take cores. I can get good density, and then I also dig up pits, here on the edge of the pavement to sample the WMM, wet mixed macadam, and the GSB, which is granular subbase, and subgrade. So I can test all these at the edge. By doing this thing, one thing I'm doing is that the traffic, I can put barriers here and traffic is easily diverted on this side. So this thing is already open. So I also run a grease ring test. I'll show you next what that is, which I developed in India because we don't have any permeability equipment here on the job. So once I take all these cores, like full depth core here, like here in this case, there is a bituminous concrete varying cores on the top, and there's a DBM, dense bitumen macadam at the top. This guy took the core on the crack itself, so you can see the crack is propagating from bituminous concrete through the DBM. So I take a full depth course and then I analyze them in the laboratory for density in all of them, bitumen content, dilation, all those kind of things. I verify those, and then I compare those values between the good and poor section. And sometimes if there's a rutting is taking place and I find there's more bitumen in the bad area as the good area, or less bitumen because will cause leveling problem or whatever. So I can, in many cases, I can find out what the problem is. So it did require taking like 10 cores, testing them and all that. So you don't want to speculate, So now I'm just showing you 2 forensic studies I did. One was a 4-lane highway in Gujarat. The existing pavement in that pavement, on that 4-lane, was 40 millimeter bituminous concrete was the surface cores on the top. Below that, they had 100 millimeter dense bituminous macadam in 2 layers. So these 2 are the bituminous 140 millimeter of bituminous surface. 250 to 300 WMM wet mixed macadam, and here the GSB, and there is a subgrade. So what was happening is that there were all kinds of fatigue cracking was taking place in the wheel track. So they thought that something should be done about that. So they brought in, they did the hard in-place recycling, which is called HIPR, which involves these steps. Those of you who don't know about recycling, what we do is that we heat the existing pavement and scarify it. Normally we can do it only like 50 millimeter. The heating doesn't penetrate much, so it might penetrate 45 to 50 millimeter. So you heat it to that thickness, and then you add 30% new mix, which is bituminous concrete mix. Then you mix the scarified mix with the new virgin mix in a traveling pug mill. Then you lay it down and compact, and total recycled depth was 52 millimeters in this case. So it gives you a recycled bituminous concrete. And here is the train which is used in HIPR, hard in-place recycling. I saw that train in the USA, but it's a Tata Hitachi equipment which was brought to India for the first time. And it was the first job they did in Gujarat, which I'm mentioning to you. So here we have, it's a very expensive, it runs in crores and crores of rupees. So Tata Hitachi collaboration, they got this equipment. The train is moving in this direction. So first there's a heater, there's an infrared heater. So it's kind of heating the surface. Another heater, because you cannot heat, you have to heat the bituminous concrete gradually. If you heat too much, then it will burn the bitumen binder. So second is heater. Third vehicle in this train is also a heater, and there's also milling equipment to scarify. You're milling. Now your wearing course is very, very soft due to heating, so you can scarify and mill it off. And then there is also a mixer here in the back. So you put 30% extra bituminous concrete in there. You both mix them. It's like a mix of mixes in a pug mill, which is also traveling on this side, and you lay down and compact. So this was the first job, in India for this equipment. And what happened is that they did this job. You can see here, there are two lanes here, which is recycled. Looks very good. Here's a service lane. You see that it looks so good, very good surface, like a new surface. So they completed this job in June of that year. And in July, the monsoon started. So they had good rainfall in Gujarat. And within a matter of few weeks, they have this kind of problem. I mean, it's very, very disappointing. You brought about a very expensive equipment, you did the first job of HIPR, and you see this kind of fatigue cracking. You did a lot of patching. You can see a lot of patching done here. And a lot of problems here. A lot of patches were done, and mix is kind of flowing out and all that. All kinds of problems showed up within a month. Very, very disappointing. So at that time, I was located in Jaipur, so they called me that because first they called the Japanese engineers, and they couldn't find, what was wrong, why it is occurring. The hard in-place recycling was done okay, but why is occurring? So I went out, but I believe in doing some testing, doing some exploration in any forensic analysis. So I told them to bring a jackhammer. I don't want to apply any water in there, just bring a jackhammer. So what we did was that we found out that the BC, which was recycled, 50 millimeter, 52 millimeter, was very good, intact, no problem. But below that, the DBM layer, which was already existing layer, was just crumbling. A lot of stripping has taken place, It was crumbling. So here the picture. In the DBM, lot of stripping. You can see again particles are mixed. There is no bitumen film here. 50%. I mean, you can break this, with your hand. so weak. So what I did was that I also, here is the DBM, which was stripped, you know. So, and here the WMM. So I dig up a hole here in the DBM, and I pour some water here, and the water just came out immediately from it. It was so porous, you know, because of stripping. The DBM was so porous that when I put water in there, water just come out on the side here. Pour water here, come out here. So I told them that, you know, your DBM layer is bad. When you did the job, you should have taken a look, you know, at what's underneath, you know. You just don't do just a recycling of BC, you know, and without looking at what's underneath, you know, you got to look at the whole. When you have to treat a patient, you know, you do all kind of testing you do, you know, whether the patient has, you know, some problem, the blood or whatever, you know. I mean, how can, so some people said, well, the water is going from the surface down, and in the monsoon it is causing a problem. So I run this grease test, you know, which I developed in India, because there's no field permeability equipment here. So what I do is that I put a grease ring, which is like 9 inches in diameter, and I pour some water like 1/2 inch deep, 12.5 millimeter water. And then I use a timing device, you know, to see how much time it takes for that water to disappear. And more porous the surface, you know, is less the time. Now, when I ran the grease test here on that recycled BC, the water just stayed there for hours, didn't penetrate at all. So I told them that the recycling is done okay, everything's fine, the contract is not at fault. I mean, the DBM is already stripped, you know, that was causing problems. So whenever you want to do anything, you should look at the whole picture before spending money, you know, you should look what's underneath. So that's what they didn't do that. Then the second case is in the forensic investigation in Azerbaijan, Europe. Now there the problem was on a 2-lane highway. It was a 21-kilometer project completed in 2004. And it was inspected by me on the job in 2007. The problem was a longitudinal crack appeared in the center of each paved lane. I mean, you don't get any crack between the lanes. You know, when you pave a lane, I mean, you can have a construction joint, you know, problem between the 2 lanes, but you don't get a crack right in the center of the paved lane, in the center of the wheel path. This crack was not continuous, but kept on developing with time with a series of pedal cracks. Sealing and resealing was a nightmare. I mean, they got fed up in 3 years, you know. They said, well, the question is, why did the crack develop in the first place? I mean, we can keep on sealing it, it's a big problem, but we want to know the cause, so it doesn't appear again on some future jobs. You know. So they called me, I was in Jaipur, so I went there. And here is a view of this road. And you can see here that this is the crack. Actually, you don't see the crack here, but they kept on sealing it, which was tracked by traffic. So all it is a black surface, but that's the crack, you know, they kept on sealing. This is the joint between the 2 lanes, construction joint. And now that can go bad. But why a crack in the middle of the paved lane? That was puzzling them, you know. So this is the crack here. So I told them, to, okay, I want to take some course, you know, on the crack and away from the crack, and do some density, you know, of the, because they're the surface course, they have a binder course, 2 layers they put down. So we measure the density of the surface course and the binder course on the crack and away from the crack. And what we found was that the surface course was okay, intact here. You can see here. And this is the crack here. And the binder course was 50% more than was stripped. You can see here. So what was happening here is that we found out that the density was very, very low of the binder course. Below the crack, the density was very, very poor. Away from the crack, density was fine. In the DBM, you can call DBM binder course. That we found out. So the question was that why the density of the DBM or the binder course, binder course was low below the crack in the middle of the lane as compared to away from the lane. So for that, you have to when you do a forensic analysis, you have to know about sometimes the equipment, the construction procedure and all that. That makes you better equipment to solve some problem, especially when you are going overseas, it can be disappointing when you cannot solve the problem. So you have to know something about the pure equipment. And like here, you can see here that there's a hopper here and the truck pours the bitumen concrete mix here, goes back, it comes out here, and there's an auger here, which kind of spreads the mix laterally, and then it's compacted. So here you can see the material flow here, upper wings, the material flows here. And then you see the auger here, which kind of mix falls here, and it is kind of spread laterally by the augers throughout the width of the pipe. Here the picture of the auger, you see the auger here, it's kind of spreading the mix sideways. The main problem of this project was that the auger is driven by a gearbox. Here is the gearbox, and these are driven by a gearbox. And what's happening is that the auger will do a good job of dispersion or lateral on both sides. But what about the mix which is going below the gearbox? So you have to have a reverse pedal, reverse auger on both sides of the gearbox, so you can throw in or tuck in some mix below the gearbox. These will take care of this way, but so you have to have a reverse auger, which is, in this case, there are reverse auger. You can see the direction, the reverse auger, which is pushing the mix below the gearbox, one reverse on that side. So you get a good mix, packed in below the gearbox. The paver which they had was some model which did not have the reverse auger. So that's why there was a lack of density here. There was insufficient material below the gearbox, lack of density. Water was being pulled in there, and it created a stripping there, and the mix kind of collapsed there and developed a cracking on the top. So in conclusion, each forensic investigation is a new challenge. It's not the same thing you find everywhere, because the local people have tried, tested everything, and they cannot find the solution. So that's why they call you, on the job to find out diagnose the problem. And here's the last slide here, which shows, that when you are on a job to find a problem, mostly you walk along the road, where you see a lot of beer bottles and all those kind of things. But you also see sometimes some unusual sight here. Now here in the USA, there's a big rat which normally crosses the road, and is killed by the traffic. And so the PWD people or highway people, when they were doing this yellow striping, they didn't care to remove that and just put the striping on top of that. It's like an unusual thing here. So with that, I will entertain any questions which you might have. I know I took too much time, but we still have 15 minutes of question and answers. So back to you, Madhulisha.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. The session was very, very interesting and valuable. So I think the participant, if anybody want to ask any questions, they can unmute and they can ask that question. So any questions from the participants?
Sir, I just wanted to know that you have inspected Middle East countries, European countries, American countries, Asian. Where you feel road quality is best, or there is local variation also?
Well, in the investigation which I have done so far, the quality was not an issue actually, because every time there's a problem, the local people do all kind of testing, and they find out that everything is fine. Bitumen content is okay, gradation is okay, mixed design is okay. Whether it's in Australia where I went, there was another problem. Whether it was in Azerbaijan or wherever in Middle East, I just designed only the airport runways only. I didn't do any forensic in there, but I've done forensic in South America and USA and all that. So I didn't find any quality was a problem. They do all the tests, everything fine, and they cannot find the answer. That's what they call me or somebody else, So in answer to your question, I couldn't find the quality was a problem.
Thank you, sir. And we also have our work to do. Others will ask questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So any other question from participants?
Good morning, sir. Yeah, I am from Orissa state in India. Actually, we are having moreover the NH sideway area is waterlogged. So that problem we have not discussed. So that's what I want to ask you the questions, because it is not possible to make retaining wall throughout the NH, but most of the area cross drainage is there. But we have seen that the road is sliding to the waterlogged area. So what is that precautions and what are the remedies we can take, sir, to not to slide that roads to the waterlogged area throughout the longitudinal sections?
Well, unless I know all the details, like you still have a retaining wall. When you say road is sliding, what is sliding? Is the bituminous concrete courses are sliding?
No, it is the bitumen, sir. Bitumen, sir. Bitumen.
It's sliding.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it sliding at the bottom of the?
It's longitudinal section, sir. That nearer to that shoulders.
Oh, near to the shoulder, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Is that more like a edge cracking I discussed?
Yeah, yes, sir. Same legs.
Yeah.
It's cracking throughout the longitudinal section, sir. Long way.
Okay. So one reason I mentioned there was like a lack of confinement would cause edge cracking, like your material in the shoulder might be giving way,
Sure.
moving laterally, and then the bituminous concrete is also moving laterally because of that. So we need a good confinement. So the question is that what the shoulder is made of, the shoulder is made of like mostly WMM or because obviously you didn't put any bituminous concrete in the shoulder, right?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Normally it is earthen shoulder, sir. So we can recommend, sir, for paved shoulder. Sir?
Yeah. If that's kind of problem taking place, I would use the WMM right to the top, and on the top I would use chip seal or surface dressing. That's what is done in the US. You use they call it crust stone base course, which ours is like WMM. So you use WMM maybe in the US they use 4 feet wide, which is you got to convert that into meter. Unfortunately, they still use old system in the US. So 4 feet wide the shoulder they apply with the WMM to the surface, and to protect the WMM they apply a chip seal, or we call surface dressing, which is also in our Indian code. So once you do that, then you have a confinement of our bituminous concrete layer, and this would not happen.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, one more question. Sir, except the truck lay-by, if we will park our trucks with loading in the national highway, is it a impact or is it a problem for the road, sir? Except to truck lay-by. Yeah.
Yeah. As I said in my presentation on rutting, the worst thing you can do to a bituminous pavement is to have a slow rate of loading. That would cause rutting problems. Or if you're extending traffic, that will also cause rutting problems. So you will see I've seen in India as well, that sometimes there's a rutting problem on long climbing lanes on our nest lines. I don't know whether you've seen that problem. I have seen that here in some cases. In the long climbing lane, the truckers have to change their gear and have to go at a very, very slow speed. And that's the area where the rutting will take place, you know. So,
Yes.
and if the trucks are standing, that's even worse. You know. So now what we have done is that in the PMB specification put out by the Bureau of Indian Standards, of which I am a member, I have drafted a performance-based specification for our PMB.
Yes, sir.
And that is based upon not only on the amount of traffic, but also on the rate of loading. So there,
Yes.
on each grade, there are four subgrades
Sure.
of PMB, which will handle the slow speed or standing traffic as well as fast speed. So when you get a chance, you know, you take a look at it. It was published just last year or year before last. A new PMB specification has been introduced in India based upon performance grade. It used the dynamic shear rheometer. We have to have the DSR to do that. And that exactly takes care of the problem which you just described. That how do we handle when the traffic speed is low or the truck is standing. So that will take care of that.
Okay, sir. So nice. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
So any other question from participants? Sir, one participant has asked, in comparatively, which pavement roads is better in India, asphalt roads or PQC? Like which road is better in Indian asphalt roads? He's asking.
Yeah, Madhulisha, you are saying comparing the cement concrete road with the
Yes.
bitumen concrete?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. In answer to your question is that, well, first of all, we understand that over 90 or 95% of the roads and streets in the whole world are made of bituminous concrete. I mean, people do have some knowledge there, you know, and they have to take some decision. So there must be something with the bituminous mix, you know, which is used more. Now, the main reason is that the cost of construction is initial investment is very low in a bituminous concrete pavement as compared to a Portland cement concrete pavement. And so if you have lack of funds, you know, then you want to build more roads, you know, especially in a developing country, you want to build more of the roads with bituminous concrete. And so that's one reason. But I think some few years ago, I heard Honorable Gadkari, he was instrumental in constructing the Bombay-Pune highway when he was Maharashtra Minister for PWD. And he was of the opinion that concrete is the answer in India, which I don't agree with him only because he built that road, you know, and they say this requires maintenance for 50 years or 100 years. Sometimes people, but normally you have to run a life cycle cost. That's what they do in the United States. They run a life cycle cost of bituminous concrete and cement concrete, looking at a period of like 35 years, 30 to 35 years. Because after 30 years, cement concrete road requires a lot of rehabilitation. People don't realize that. So if you include that cost, now in the meantime, the bituminous concrete might have been paved 3 times maybe. So that you also take that into account. So once you do that in the life cycle cost, the bituminous concrete usually comes out ahead. So in the US, you know, they are required to do this life cycle cost analysis and then decide. Not like just like the minister says so or somebody says so, you do that. You know? No, that's not the case. So now I understand that even in the US, there's a cement industry. And we have to give some business to them also because they are domestic industry. So there are some national highways in the US which they decide that, okay, few of them should go to cement concrete. So our cement industry is supported. And I understand that. So I won't use cement concrete only on a few projects, you know, so that our cement industry in India is also supported. But on the whole, the bituminous concrete comes out way ahead when you conduct a life cycle cost. and that life cycle cost should include a period of 30 or 40 years. When you are not for like 10 years. I don't know whether that answers your question or not.
I think
I'm not saying Madhulisa because I'm a bituminous concrete engineer. I'm not saying because of that. I'm just as a for the country. I'm saying that in the country we should do this analysis, and once in a while we should allow cement concrete, especially near the urban areas. You know, that's what they do in the USA. If there's a national highway in the urban area, there you want to use cement concrete because too much disruption will take place when you are overlaying with bituminous concrete all the time in the urban area. So there are places where you want to do that. There are places where you have long climbing lanes or whatever, you know, then you want to use cement concrete. Near the toll plaza and all that, you want to use cement concrete because the traffic is standing and slow.
any other question from participants?
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, in thermal cracking, sir, why the cracking occurs in transverse direction, not in longitudinal direction?
Yeah, that's a good question. because the road, you know, it might be like 24 feet wide, you know, but it's a long in one direction. So when the contraction will take place, it will take place, you know, in the transverse direction. Like if you have a beam, you know, then a beam will crack transversely. It won't crack in the long direction because the road is long, it's like a finite, you know, length, you know, so it will occur only in the transverse direction.
Thank you, sir.
So now I think the queries of all the participants have been addressed. So, sir, it is an honor and privilege for me to invite you to participate in this FDP program as an expert speaker. And thank you so much, sir, for accepting the invitation. And thank you a lot for this informative and wonderful session. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you very much, Madhulisha, for organizing this thing. I really enjoyed interacting